He did not consent to having the conversation at that moment. I ignored, and I tried to repair anyways, and it only made it worse. He basically was pushing even further away. He was doing the opposite of reassuring me. Before we begin, I have a favor to ask. Pause for just a second to make sure you're subscribed. If you're ready for honesty, more self-trust, and more peace in your relationships, then you're in the right place. Hey babes, how is it going? To be honest, I had no freaking idea what I was going to record a podcast episode on today. So over on Substack, I asked our community and I was like, hey, what kind of podcast episode are you guys looking for? What kind of topics are at the top of your mind? And there was one person who said, the intersection between codependency and jealousy. And that one stood out to me and it sort of pinged me. And pings for me, I guess I should say, are usually my indication to like lean in. Like if I notice it, if it comes up like again and again, then that's usually my invitation to explore it. And along with the ping, there is also a resistance or a hesitation, which is also sometimes my indicator to lean in. So as I was, getting my water, setting up for a podcast recording now, there's this memory that came in from last year between Justin and I that happened that was definitely a moment of jealousy that I experienced on my end. And there's just so many other layers underneath that jealous moment that I didn't realize at the time because I was so activated, but outside of the experience, I could realize and see like what that thread really was. And so I think that's what I'm going to do today is just tell you guys this story. I have shared it over on Substack when it happened last year, but I don't think I actually recorded a podcast episode on it, mostly because it was really tender and vulnerable and uncomfy to just share it in general. And the podcast is like a whole nother level of vulnerable storytelling, believe it or not, that is still sometimes challenging for me. Sometimes it's easier for me to write what I've experienced, to write the story out, telling it, verbalizing it, sharing it in this type of platform and way is a whole nother level of vulnerability. So I'm going to go ahead and share it here in hopes that what comes of this story is, one, maybe you can see yourself in this, and two, maybe you can also take away from it some things that I realized about myself underneath I don't want to say facade of jealousy, but it's like that's almost the top layer. And then there's all these layers underneath that come up. And for you to maybe consider what those layers underneath the jealousy are for you. And then most importantly, just ending with a practice or a tool to help support you in moving through those moments with a lot more compassion, a lot more grace, and a lot more clarity, which will always benefit you. And if it benefits you, it will, of course, benefit your relationship. So ironically or not, this happened almost a year ago, pretty much. And I'm going to throw in a bunch of different context because now, a year later, I can see so many more pieces of the puzzle that I could not see at the time. And so I'll just set the scene with it was a beautiful summer day. And I was just about to leave for a week-long trip. For the past few years, I've led a kids camp at this women's gathering here in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest. And this day that all of this took place happened to be the day before I was leaving for this week-long trip. So imagine like no service, not talking to Justin probably for a week. We've done this, a few years now in a row. So it wasn't something that I didn't think that I could do, but just to give context, like that was something that was also looming, that there was going to be some distance and space between him and I. But that's general context. Now, this particular day was a day where we were celebrating one of our friends' birthdays. And it was on a boat. It was a beautiful summer day. We got ready. We were stoked. We were excited. We were just ready for a fun night. We get there. We get on the boat. There's a DJ. Some of our other friends are there that we haven't seen for a long time. And so it was just honestly the best time. Like, Justin and I were in sync, like dancing, singing, laughing. Just imagine the most high that you could possibly have out with your partner. Like, that is what we were experiencing. Just totally both on the same page, having so much fun, laughing, singing with each other and just like with our friends. It was beautiful. It was so much fun. Well, gosh, I like, even a year later, I still am like having a hard time telling the story, I guess. So basically, something that happened was there was somebody on this boat who had been talking to Justin, a woman, okay? And I didn't think anything of it initially. Like, she was asking him questions. It wasn't anything weird. I didn't like clock it or anything. But then at a certain point, she approached me in the night and then she was like, "Are you two dating?" And I was like, yeah, that's my partner. That's when I was like, is she trying to, flirt with him or whatever? Like, now I'm in my head, because why else would someone ask that question? I don't know. So immediately I kind of have this like little trigger that's sitting like deep down in my belly, but I kind of brush it aside and I go about having fun with all of my friends and try not to overthink it. And then the night comes to an end. She tried to talk to him, or she did talk to him a few more times throughout that night. And I was there for some of the conversations. It was like about music. It was about different songs. It wasn't anything like deep. But as we're leaving, he says goodbye to her. Like, we were saying goodbye to everyone. But there was just something about him saying bye to her that, because we don't know her, it's not like she was our friend or anything. And it just lit that little spark in my belly that was like kind of simmering into a flame. And I immediately said something very passive aggressive or snarky to him. I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of just like, nice, Justin. Like, had to blah, 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 say bye to her and did it. Like, I just said something, like I said, snarky. He was caught off guard. He was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I just started pinpointing all these little things, like, you had a conversation with her here, and then she asked if we were dating. And I just started like lighting him up, like he was on trial for having conversations with another woman. Needless to say, he is now completely taken aback and triggered himself. He shuts down and basically completely withdraws, which for me and my like jealous rage that I'm experiencing, like, I need validation. I need reassurance. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I need validation or reassurance. I'm just lighting him up and like in judgment, and probably just making him feel worse for something that he doesn't even realize, like, that he did anything wrong. Like, he was being kind, he was being friendly, he was talking to people, he was socializing, right? So I want to just like pause here for a moment to just name the jealousy that can come up in relationships, right? We see our partner talk to someone, we perceive that through a lens that we have, right? I'm not saying like you're blind to obvious flirting or like inappropriate touch or anything like that. So please don't try to justify your partner's, inappropriate behavior by sugarcoating it. Like, in this scenario, Justin was socializing. I can see that there was an inappropriate behavior that was taking place. It's not like he was dancing with her or anything like that. But I just want to take a moment to just like name the jealousy that we feel. And when that jealousy is present, like where does that feeling live in our body and what's underneath it? How we figure out what's underneath it is by asking ourselves, what is the fear? What is the fear here? In that moment when I'm in the car grilling him and he's now withdrawing, what is the fear? The fear is that okay, actually, I'm going back to what I was actually afraid of in that moment because I have a different one that's coming up for me right now. But in the moment, I was afraid of being embarrassed. Like, how embarrassing for this woman who's dating this guy who had conversations with this girl and like had to say bye to her, give her a hug goodbye or whatever. At the time, I was feeling flustered, frustrated, angry about how I looked, how other people were perceiving me, the embarrassment of the interactions that I was seeing him have with her, and them thinking like, poor girl, poor woman with this guy who's like talking to her. You know, that was the story that I had created for me and for us that was fueling my attacking him in the car. But now I will say that there's a whole nother fear that I realized throughout the night, that I was actually afraid of him choosing someone else over me, right? So at first it's that ping of jealousy, and then under that ping of jealousy is looking like an idiot, and then under looking like an idiot is the fear of him choosing someone else over me, and then underneath that is me being alone, right? Not being good enough, right? What ended up taking place the rest of the night, Justin is trying to disengage from the conversation because I'm not having a calm and collected conversation with him. So he is pulled away. But that has only further triggered me because I don't feel safe in this moment. And I'm trying to get reassurance from him without saying that. Like I said, I wasn't saying, hey, what I'm needing right now is just reassurance, because the fear that came up for me was that you're going to choose someone else over me. And that's what I'm navigating right now. That's not what I said. I can see that now, like that might have made the conversation potentially go in a different direction. But I was trying to get him to admit to some sort of wrongdoing so that I could be justified in my frustration and my anger. And so he's withdrawn. I go into our room, I lay there, I start contemplating, I start reflecting, I start seeing the threads, and then I go back to him to try to repair. Now, am I proud of myself for reflecting in that moment, regulating myself in our bedroom, trying to come back to repair? Yes, I am proud of myself for that. However, you guys hear me say it here on the podcast all the time, repair at a neutral time. Was this a neutral time, friends? Do you think post me, making him feel bad the entire car ride home, getting home, him trying to, separate himself by sitting out in the living room, he put on a show or something, and I went to our room. Is me coming back after all of this blew up a neutral time? Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't. As you could guess, it was not a neutral time. I sat and I asked for his consent. He did not consent. He did not consent to having the conversation at that moment. I ignored and I tried to repair anyways, and it only made it worse. He basically was pushing even further away. He was doing the opposite of reassuring me. And that was making me even more anxious. And so then I was desperate to try to repair in the moment. I was just sitting here in the living room. He was actually sitting in this chair. I was sitting in our coffee table in front of me. And I was just like begging him to try to repair, which made it just explode in front of my face. Some of you guys may have read the Substack post that I wrote a year ago when all of this happened. But he basically told me he didn't want to be with me anymore, which was crazy, and that's wild and And what I can see now were two people with insecure attachment styles just at their like peak attachment style. I needed to repair right now because I felt unsafe. He felt so unsafe that he had to say the most hurtful thing to try to get me to go away because I wasn't listening, right? He's avoidant. He can't have this conversation right now. I'm anxious. I need to have this conversation right now. What ended up happening? Us both saying things that we were totally mean and that we don't actually mean, but that like we're trying to elicit a response to try to get a need met that neither one of us were listening to. Does that make sense? He needed space. That was his need that I wasn't listening to. And so he reverted back to what his insecure attachment style has taught him, which is like, if I say something incredibly mean, this person will go away and I can get that space. Whereas like my anxious attachment is, if there is any space, that means there's a problem. I need to fix it. I'm not going to be okay until this is resolved, right? Needless to say, we both acted from those wounded places, which is something that I think a lot of relationships can carry those signatures, right? And I don't think that it's like wrong or bad. I think awareness is the thing that is most important in this scenario. But then we went to bed not good, like we were unwell. We didn't resolve it before we went to bed. That next morning, I'm leaving for a week, right? So it's like that night, I had an experience where you told me you don't want to be with me anymore, and I'm about to be gone for a whole entire week. So I have a whole nother layer of dysregulated feelings inside of me. And luckily, I packed my car, got ready because it was like a week-long camping trip. And before I left, we sat. Neutral time. Time has passed. We have slept. We've drank water. We sit down and I ask for consent again. This time he consents. I said something along the lines of, last night you said you didn't want to be with me anymore. Were you saying that because that's truly what you meant, or were you saying that for another reason? Like you were hurt or you were trying to hurt me or whatever. And then he got to clear it up with me. He got to say what was really going on for him, say what he really meant. He said he didn't obviously want to break up with me because we're, like we're engaged now, which is funny or not. But we got to have that repair. We got to have that conversation. I got to spend a week to really dissect like what happened in that moment. And so I think this story and this moment came up for me when I saw codependency and, jealousy, because I believe that jealousy in many of its forms is truly just a fear underneath it, right? If this person likes this other person, there's that fear of not being chosen. If this person is talking to this other person, they might like them more than me. They might leave me, right? There's a fear of not being chosen. There's a fear of abandonment. There's a fear of rejection underneath it. And so we tried to reconcile those core fears of not being good enough, being rejected, or being abandoned by trying to control the external environment, by projecting our feelings and emotions onto the other person, our partner, or the person that they're talking to, right? That happens too sometimes, where we like attack the person who's talking to our partner. I know it can show up in many forms. I watch a lot of Love Island. So I think the opportunity if jealousy is something that shows up in your relationship, for us, it really doesn't show up very often. Like that was something that just happened like once. We haven't had a moment like that since then. And so it was kind of random, but there was a lot of other things that were context around it. We had a really good time, upper limit problem. Things are going really good. Everything's happy. I'm having the best time of my life with my partner. How can I self-sabotage it, find a problem, and explode it into a million pieces because this is too much good stuff all at once? Another piece was that I was leaving for a week. So feeling maybe this fear underneath not being with him for a whole week. And so here, let me cause this problem and this rupture before I leave, to now ruminate on and suffer over for the next week. There's just so many things that were unconsciously at play. And I think that jealousy can be one of those indicators that there's unconscious patterns or beliefs or stories that are asking to be excavated. So what I want to leave you with today is ask yourself, when jealousy shows up in your life or in your relationship, what is the fear beneath it? You can think of a specific scenario, right? That might be most helpful where jealousy showed up for you. What were you afraid was going to happen in that moment? What was the underlying fear? And because this season of the podcast is all about healing the mother wound and doing this work in real time, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom on Spotify or on, if you're watching or listening to this on Substack, and in the comments, write, what was the fear underneath that jealousy moment for you? What were you afraid was going to happen? And another thing that you can do here, if your partner is the one who tends to run jealous, you can ask them, hey, I see you. What's the fear underneath this? What's going on? What are you afraid will happen? Because jealousy is just, for me, jealousy is just the top layer. If we can get underneath that and actually identify the fear and then do an inner child practice to tend to that part of us, to resolve that internally rather than trying to reconcile it externally, that's when we see the biggest growth, not only in ourself and building self-trust and resilience within us, but also building deeper connection, vulnerability, intimacy with our partners. Because I was able to bring this to Justin after I had excavated it. And now he's able to see a more vulnerable part of me that all of this stemmed from. But initially, right, I just went to blaming him and wanting to make him responsible for it. But the really neat thing when you're in a relationship where both partners are trying to cultivate a healthy, safe, and secure relationship is that when I was vulnerable and I took responsibility for the fear underneath the jealousy, Justin also stepped forward and took responsibility for his part, right? He said, what were the parts that really pinged you? And I got to tell him, when she asked if you were my boyfriend, and then like the continued conversations and then needing to hug her before we left, those were things that pinged me. And then he got to take responsibility, not because I asked him, but he was like, I hear you. Like, thank you for telling me that this is something that came up for you. And he took responsibility and apologized for the things that he did that hurt me. And I think that's truly what we're looking for in relationships. Not just one-sided where I'm constantly taking responsibility, but in my vulnerability, letting that set the stage that this is a safe relationship to be vulnerable, to take responsibility, to take accountability. It invites him to do the same. And that's how we continue to show up in our relationship. I think if I took responsibility and goes, yep, you're the one that did the wrong, you're the one who did that everything, and I'm not going to say anything. Yep, thanks for apologizing because you're right, you did blah 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 blah, and it was just more blame on me. That's not building a healthy, secure relationship. That's someone continuously not taking responsibility or showing up to a relationship. Safe and secure relationships, we both come to the table. We both can be have some humility, if you will. We can both take responsibility for our parts. So I just feel like I need to name that too, because oftentimes I get asked, what's Justin doing? And I don't talk about Justin and what he's doing because this is about just me in my experience, but I can say that, I do have a partner who shows up in that way. And those are things and indicators that we want to look for is, are they willing to have the hard conversations? Are they willing to take accountability and responsibility? Are they willing to repair? And if they're not willing to do those things, then you want to consider if this relationship is actually aligned to the type of relationship you're looking for, one that is vulnerable, honest, safe, right? Because if you're always the one to blame, then that isn't building a safe relationship. I think we have our parts and we can take responsibility for our parts, but every relationship has two dynamics. And so just remembering that. Okay, that's what I have for you on jealousy and codependency. And honestly feels really uncomfortable telling you guys that story. I think it's, it perpetuates the thing that I was afraid of even in that moment was like embarrassment. I didn't want to be embarrassed, but I really just felt embarrassed by my own like blackout rage of jealousy. And I'm grateful for it now because it taught me so much about that emotion that I really didn't have a close relationship to before that scenario. And it helped me excavate it in a way that brought me more safety internally and also brought me and Justin closer, even though it did feel like one of the biggest ruptures we've had. It was super healing for us as well in a lot of ways because of the ways that we got to talk about just being in relationship with each other. So that's what I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the story time more than I did. If you appreciate the shadow work prompts, if you appreciate doing guided inner child practices, which is what I would encourage you guys to do after you do the shadow work question around the jealousy and the fear underneath it, I would invite you to do an inner child healing practice. If you want to learn what that looks like and what that process is like, we do that every single month in the Codependency Alchemy membership over on Substack. So if you want to join the membership, there's always a link to join in the show notes or description box below. Every month, there's 2 private podcast episodes that go out. You may have noticed on Spotify that they are locked for paid subscribers. Some of those episodes are examples of a live shadow work and inner child practice that I guide our community through. And then another one of those locked podcast episodes are AMA chats or Ask Me Anything, where members drop their questions in our chat and then I answer them live in real time with our community. And then those are the podcast episodes that go out. So if you've been wondering what those episodes are about, all of those get unlocked when you join the Codependency Alchemy membership on Substack. Joining the membership is the number one way to support this podcast. So if this podcast has been supportive for you, that's a great way to support. Or there's other free ways to support, like rating the podcast or reviewing it. It goes such a long way if you haven't done so already. I always appreciate you taking the time to do so. Thank you all so much. I will see you all next week. I love you so much. Bye.